An Australian suspect handcuffed in front of his Breaking Bad poster. I am the one who knocks. Criminal bosses were tricked into using an FBI-run encrypted messaging app. The upshot? 800 arrests in 18 countries. 8 tons of cocaine seized, 250 guns, more than £34 million in cash and cryptocurrencies. But despite the cop drama feel, perhaps the real coup? The numbers of lives saved and the brakes put on lives ruined.
We could arrest many of those who instigate murders.
There were over 100 threats to life that were mitigated.
Acted upon 21 threats to kill, including saving a family of 5.
So how did the FBI and others do it, and why was it so successful? Because in the globalized world of crime, crooks need to talk to each other. Over the last number of years, intelligence services have hacked and disrupted messaging systems that crime bosses thought were secure. Criminals were desperate for a new trustworthy platform. They thought they'd found it when they discovered ANOM. Thing is, it had been secretly developed by the FBI, unbeknownst to the crime syndicates who had total confidence in it.
In fact, ANOM's distributors, administrators, and agents had so much confidence in the secrecy of their devices that they openly marketed them to other potential users as designed by criminals for criminals. In reality, the criminals were not underneath the radar. They were on it.
But how to get the doctored handsets into the hands of the gangsters? Step forward, alleged drugs kingpin Hakan Ayak. Born to Turkish parents, grew up in Sydney. He was identified as an influencer, was convinced to use the handsets by undercover agents, and soon they were all the rage in the criminal underworld. Over 18 months, security services were able to monitor 27 million messages. They had hit the crime comms motherlode.
More than 12,000 encrypted devices used by more than 300 criminal syndicates operating in more than 100 countries.
The difficulty now for crime organisations, what communications network or devices can they trust? The success of this operation is getting a lot of fanfare, and rightly so. But if it was so effective, the question for law enforcement is, why didn't they just keep stum about it and keep using it?
I can only assume that included in the operational plan, included in the advice from the lawyers, etc., perhaps rules around disclosure in the States or in some of the other jurisdictions, it was felt that they would have to reveal this as a technique, and that probably forced their hand.
9,000 law enforcement officers around the world were involved in the operation. Over the coming months, there'll be hundreds of criminal court cases as a result. And as for the people who introduced ANOM to the criminal fraternity, they are on the run, both from the police and from their own.
Porrick O'Brien reporting. Well, earlier I spoke to former FBI Cyber Division Chief of Staff and White House National Security Council member Jordan Ray Kelly, now head of cybersecurity for the Americas at FTI Consulting. I started by asking her how the security services utilized the digital age.
That's right. This is really another innovative strike against crime. And this time we're using the online interfaces that we sometimes worry about. We're using that to strike back at the criminals. The criminals need this infrastructure to operate. And if they don't have infrastructure, their efforts are really impeded. And what we've seen here is law enforcement around the globe using that infrastructure to get back at the bad guys online.
And specifically because of the digital age and the use of digital technology, you were able to trap involvement in all sorts of other countries as well.
when we purchase a device or when we purchase an application, we really need to know that we're providing a lot of our information that's going across those applications and devices to the owners and operators. And so that's what the bad guys didn't think about here. They trusted that infrastructure. They used it to facilitate their enterprises. And because they trusted that piece of the infrastructure and law enforcement had access to it, they provided a wealth of information into what they were doing. This is really a digital sting operation.
Nevertheless, this was crime on a sophisticated digital level, and one always fears that big-time criminals are one step ahead.
I think this shows that they're not. I think this shows that they can be caught at their game. They do need infrastructure to advance their means and advance their objectives. And so this is really showing that law enforcement was one step ahead. They got ahead of the criminals by being the ones that were offering the infrastructure that facilitated the acts. This is the kind of thing you see in movies, and it certainly made me really proud to be a member of the law enforcement community. And I think that even though the bad guys, they certainly have sophisticated means, they're not bound by a lot of international norms and laws. We know that law enforcement can really catch them at their own game.
800 people involved in terms of the criminals. I mean, will they all be brought to justice in the different countries in which they performed?
So I think that'll be interesting to see how we use the different actors that have been ensnared in this, the use of this platform. Will we be able to use them as sources for additional information about other criminal acts? I saw as many as 9,000 folks might have been using this application at one time. So it goes from maybe 800 active law enforcement actions to 9,000 people who might have information about criminal activity around the globe. So I think there's a lot of potential future action, even though now this platform is out there, this operation has been made public. I think there's a lot of continued law enforcement action that will be a result of this particular platform being out there and being used by the criminals.
I don't want to sound like a cynical old journalist, but I mean, is it really as good as this?
It's like I said, this is the kind of thing you would think to see in a movie. I think that this is really a proud day for law enforcement around the globe. I've read an article that this was an idea that was dreamed up maybe at a pub. And this is something they probably couldn't have imagined how successful this was going to be. 18 months at least of capturing this criminal activity. So this is really a proud day for the good guys.
Jordan Ray Kelly, it's rare we do an interview that is a joyous outcome in dealing with crime. Well done. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.